Hi there, we are so glad that you can join with us for our message day. We are continuing on in our series called Equip Others. I thought we were completely done with videos and we were back to sort of in-person stuff, but circumstances haven't allowed it for this Sunday, unfortunately. But we are glad you can join with us for our series entitled Equip Others. And it's called Equip Others because we want our emphasis to be not on ourselves, but on others. Is how can we equip one another to live a life of faith? How can we equip people in our workplaces and in our families for a life of faith? As you meet together this morning, whether it's in person or online, we'd love you to post to our WhatsApp group about the things that you think have been gained through the last 18 months of COVID and the things that have been lost over the last 18 months of COVID. So if you could do that, that would be fantastic. That would enable people wherever they are to connect with one another. So join with us in doing that now. Thank you to those of you who are able to post on WhatsApp. It really helps us to keep connected wherever we are, whether we're at home watching later or on a live stream or in the building listening together. When I think about that question, I wonder whether some of the things that we might have lost over the last year are things like a connection with the people that we love, that during that time we lost that. And connection as well with the rest of the human race as we go out shopping and or to work and do the ordinary things of life. And in some cases, maybe we've lost friendships because we weren't able to keep in touch during that time. Maybe we lost some of our connection as a church community despite setting up groups to encourage and support one another. Some people felt left out of that connectivity as church. Maybe things were more difficult for families who are already struggling with different issues. Maybe mental health and access to services that they need were restricted during that time. But also, maybe during that time, we've gained some things. A sense maybe of how interconnected we are as a world. An appreciation of relationships that we didn't know we appreciated quite as much before. Maybe the awareness that there is something more to life than what we were doing, and we had time to stop and reflect. Or maybe for you as a family, it was a real time where you could spend more time together. The title is Recovery and Discovery. Discovery because also now it's time to look forward as well, to look at the next chapter of our lives together and personally, to see where God is at work in the world and in us and through us. Discovery as experimentation, trying, failing, searching, being open, listening to God. Today we're looking at this subject through the life of Moses. We've looked at many things. In the last few weeks, we've looked at a vision that feels too big for any of us. But maybe together, if we each do a part of it, our part of it, the church, this church, and the church in our country, there is hope for us and our world. That as we recapture a sense of awe at our amazing God, we get a perspective on this, of our smallness and yet God's bigness. We also stated that Jesus has to be the centre because Jesus is our Lord and King and is the fulfillment of all things. And that somehow our challenge is to get out there and beautify the gospel as people through our daily lives, living a questionable life, a life that provokes questions, because that's what Jesus did. Because people nothing like Jesus were drawn to Jesus and then asked him questions about who he was in faith and life and so many things. We are heading into the life of Moses today to hear what God has to say to us about recovering and discovering through his life. He is one of the people who was close to God, and also we have lots of different pictures of his life in the Old Testament. He operated out of a different time, a different culture, but his story is still helpful to us today. His story is likely joined from different sources, and if you were to head back into the original Hebrew, you would notice from those different styles that come through in different parts of the story and accounts that there were a few different people contributing to what we know about the life of Moses. And we're looking at a few different pictures today. Moses in front of the burning bush. Moses grabbing the staff by the tail. Moses in front of the Pharaoh. And Moses as the community of Israelites need water. And Moses provides water through the power of God. Moses, when we find him in front of the burning bush, is hiding out in a different place after running away from Egypt, being busy, being married, part of a family and farming, when he was forced, literally forced to stop and to reconsider life, where he was at, what he was doing, who he was. In Exodus 3, after 4 decades of walking around the same 100 acres of desert, tending sheep, raising a family, the life of Moses was forever changed by this particular moment. While tending his sheep, he came on a burning bush. What is unusual about this scene is the fact that it didn't burn. God speaks to Moses out of the burning bush and changes the course of Hebrew history. Moses receives a direct call from God to an incredibly important task. But I have some questions about this scene. How long had the bush been burning before Moses was able to stop long enough to notice it? How long did he have to stare at the burning bush to realize that it actually wasn't burning up? Rabbi Lawrence Kushner writes, "The burning bush was not a miracle, it was a test." God wanted to find out whether or not Moses could pay attention for long enough, for more than a few minutes. And when Moses did, God spoke. If Kushner is right, we have to consider for ourselves, are we simply too busy to pay attention to the fact that we are standing on holy ground, to the fact that God wants to speak to us in this moment? Do our desires mean that we fill our schedule to the brim, so much so that we fail to notice God speaking to us? Maybe we're just too busy with doing ministry to notice that we are standing on holy ground. And how long has God been calling and we haven't noticed? Can we as people learn a daily practice of paying attention to God? A rhythm of life that allows us to hear God speaking. I wonder what it takes you to actually stop and reconsider life. Would it be a pandemic? Maybe not. A passionate, well-worded sermon? Maybe not. A disaster in your family? Hopefully not. Let's choose. Let's choose to stop. Choose to personally reassess where we're going, what we're doing, and be still before God, without anything more than just a desire to hear what God wants to say. Stopping, and specifically stopping for God. It has so many benefits. It has health benefits, lowering blood pressure, improving concentration, calming thought, stimulating brain growth, reducing cortisol, stimulating creativity, improving insomnia, and encouraging mindfulness. But even more than all of that, it opens the door to God speaking, who speaks to Elijah in a whisper, so that Elijah has to pay attention and hear him, who speaks through and in and around Jesus as Jesus goes away and takes time in silence alone. The God who knit you together wants the opportunity to be quiet and speak with you. So this week, stop at some point. In front of this burning bush, in all of its weirdness, Moses is forced to stop. But in that, he begins the process of recovery and discovery. This is the time when Moses remembers who he is, recovering who he is as an Israelite, as a person under the one true God, remembering the people that he is part of. But also, this is Moses recovering who God created him to be as a leader amongst the Egyptians, recovering God's direction for his life. It is time that we all stop running from our trauma, from our past, but step forward as a child of God. Let God be the one who directs you, who helps you recover and discover what God has for you. Give God time to give your life direction, that you might live each day guided by God's Spirit. When God finds Moses in this moment, he is living in a foreign land, away from everything that felt familiar to him. We have had a pandemic and a period where we were unable to meet together as a church. It's like we've been living in a foreign land together. Maybe we can understand a little bit more about what Moses was understanding in this time in his life. God is going to take Moses back before he goes forward. Moses is going to go back and deal with his past before he moves forward into the promised land. God in this time is challenging us to stop, to recover, and then to move on. If we look at Moses, he continually tries to avoid what God is trying to do in his life. The calling that will turn him into a leader, that will give him mountaintop experiences, that will shape a nation and history, and yet he constantly tries to refuse this path. I'm sure we can empathize with his desire to go his own way, and it's likely what we do most of our time. We opt for safety over adventure. We desire comfort over challenge and risk. But God so often moves people out of their comfort zones to experience something new, because as we move out of our comfort zone, we can no longer rely on our own ability. We have to rely on God's resources. Moses is then given one of his first challenges. This is that account. Moses answered, "What if they don't believe me or listen to me and say, 'The Lord did not appear to you'?" Then the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" "A staff," he replied. The Lord said, "Throw it on the ground." Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back to a staff in his hand. "This," said the Lord, "is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you." As we move forward, we're going to need to recover as Moses did before the burning bush. But we're also going to need to discover new ways. I don't know whether you've thought of this, but for me, this is the moment that Moses should have refused to do something. and to complain, to grab a snake by the tail. That does not seem like a logical thing to do, because as he's going to do that, the snake could turn around and bite him. It is an illogical place to pick up a snake. Moses is discovering with God that the expected way is not always the God way. This is the first time he will have to rely on God's wisdom of many times during the next years. And that is a massive learning curve, not just for him, but for us too, as we take that journey into accepting that God's ways are better than our ways. Are we ready to listen to God and do something that to all our understanding seems ridiculous, but to God makes perfect sense? Are we ready to follow even when we're unsure where it will take us? Are we ready to be led by the Spirit of God and not our preferences? We need time to recover and heal from the past, but then each of us individually and together also need to discover what God has for us in the future. These are not comfortable ideas, and there will be discomfort along the way. As we discover in Moses' story, following God is not always easy. Listen to what happened to when Moses met Pharaoh. That same day, Pharaoh gave this order to the slave drivers and overseers in charge of the people. You are no longer to supply the people with straw for making bricks. Let them go and gather their own straw, but require them to make the same number of bricks as before. Don't reduce the quota. They are lazy. That is why they are crying out, let us go and sacrifice to our God. Make them work harder for people so that they keep working and pay no attention to lies. Keep at this moment the ending in mind of where God is taking them, to the promised land, to be a nation who are a light to the world. Are we ready to walk onwards through the challenges to the good place that God has for us, even if it means challenge along the way and risk? Would you be willing to follow, even if it risked the closing down of the church that you love? Would you be willing to follow, even if it risked you not having a comfortable retirement? Would you be willing to follow God, even if it risked you having to work harder for a time? Would you be willing to follow God, even if it meant risking leaving the places that you know well? As we look to recover from this pandemic, we need God's plans for the future, not our own. We need God's plan because that is where we find peace. We need God's plan for the future because the future of our nation and communities and towns and families rely on it. We need God's plan because God's plan is best for us. We need God's plan because he brings hope and life. As we discern what God is calling us to, we need to stay humble, because as we discover from Moses' story, it's so easy to begin relying on ourselves and not relying completely on God. Hear this part of the story. Now there was no water for the community, and the people gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron. They quarreled with Moses and said, "If only we had died when our brothers fell dead before the Lord. Why did you bring the Lord's community into this wilderness, that we and our livestock should die here? Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to this terrible place? It has no grain or figs, grapevines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink." Moses and Aaron went from the assembly to the entrance to the tent of meeting and fell face down, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. The Lord said to Moses, "Take the staff, and you and your brother Aaron gather the assembly together. Speak to that rock before their eyes, and it will pour out its water. You will bring water out of the rock for the community, so they and their livestock can drink." So Moses took the staff from the Lord's presence, just as he had commanded him. He and Aaron gathered the assembly together in front of the rock, and Moses said to them, "Listen, you rebels, must we bring you water out of this rock?" Then Moses raised his arm and struck the rock twice with his staff. Water gushed out, and the community and their livestock drank. Instead of speaking to the rock as God had said, he got the staff that worked for him in the past and he used it again. I imagine, and I don't know if this is right, him whirling it around his head before he hits the rock, a bit of theatre, so that the people might know that he's really frustrated with them. But he didn't need it. He didn't need to do it that way. God said, speak to the rock. Moses uses the thing that he'd used in the past to wave over the water, to throw out before the Pharaoh, and it turned into a snake in this situation as well. The place of his greatest successes became the place of his greatest failure, because in the next moments him and Aaron hear the whisper of God. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them. The place of his greatest success becomes the place of his greatest failure. We have to stay humble too, not thinking we have it right or that we have all the right answers. And I want to say something uncomfortable. The way we have done church in the past has contributed towards our success. But if we cling onto it too strongly, hold onto it too firmly and trust in it rather than God, we risk the place of our success becoming the place of our failure. We cannot think if we do things the same or if we just keep going the same, if we use the same methods if we have been successful in the past, we will be successful in the future. Our call is literally just to follow God wherever he leads. Our call is to follow God. Spend time to accept and recover from the last 18 months or whatever it is that you need to recover from, so that you might be able to move forward and discover what God has for you next. Take time to regularly pay attention to what God might be wanting to speak into your lives. Just carving out opportunity to listen to God. Keep humble. Don't think that you know the way to do things or we know the way to do things. But keep humble and keep going God's way, whatever happens. I want to finish by saying that God, whatever, is always working, even when we're not aware of it, even during pandemics, even in this moment. God is bigger than our minds can comprehend. He is working outside of our small spheres of influence. God is not like a chicken in a chicken coop, bound by the boundaries around, but God is more like a bird migrating between cultures, moving seamlessly between nations and countries, going wherever he needs to. God is ahead of us. That bush, it was probably burning before Moses arrived. It probably took Moses a while to realize what was going on. But God is there before us, already working. And remember, God spoke to Moses in the middle of his working day. He was not in a spiritual place, building, temple. He was out with the sheep, working, ordinary things of life. Be paying attention to God wherever you are, ready to be directed by him.